Not used to using one of these, but I thought I kind of want to get what I say right. First of all, St. Louis is a great place to have a convention. They have really good ethnic restaurants, wonderful parks, great architecture. Go to St. Louis. That was the highlight of my week. Okay. I also want to thank you for being you and for all of your thoughts and emails and texts and calls asking, how are you doing, John? How are you doing? I think, well, I'm okay. How are you doing? But I appreciate your contacting and your concern. I am eventually going to preach a sermon, but I just want to do some what I think are random remarks and random reflections on the General Conference. And the sermon will be related to General Conference, so you're getting a full plate today. What happened at General Conference was tragic. It was short-sighted. It was un-Wesleyan, and it was un-Methodist. It is not the United Methodist Church I've known for all these years. We didn't shoot ourselves in the foot. We shot ourselves in the head. It was tragic. I know many of you have had thoughts about the United Methodist Church because you've told me what your thoughts are. I've had many of those thoughts, but I'm sure you've had thoughts other than I have. One thought I've had is, I would never join an organization that was homophobic. I would never join an organization that was racist. I would never support a racist or homophobic organization. And the United Methodist Church looks that way and acts that way, at least on homophobia. And so I've wrestled with, should I stay in this denomination? And I know you've wrestled with this. Should you stay in this denomination? I've wondered about apportionments, the share of the church, of our offerings that we give to the district, the conference, and the general church. I've wondered if we should escrow our apportionments or not give apportionments as a protest, as a boycott of what the general church has done. I'm a straight white male, you know that. I can't imagine the hurt that continues for LGBTQ plus persons. Every general conference, we go through this. We get our hopes up, and they are dashed, and we are told to be patient, to wait. I can't imagine the hurt. And I'm not going to presume to tell anybody who's on the margins how they should feel or what they should do. When we were driving home from St. Louis Tuesday night, the report of what happened at General Conference came up on our radio. And I listened to it, and I called a minister friend in the conference, and I said, I just listened to the NPR report, and I said, we look really bad. General Conference made us look bad. And she said to me, we don't look bad. We are bad. And I thought, yeah, let's just admit that. We have done the wrong thing, and we have done a bad thing. We have hurt many people. In the end, I feel like nothing was accomplished at General Conference other than we've hurt people more so. I got to thinking about my friend's comment, "We are bad." I was reminded of the prophet who said, "We should love the good and hate the evil." The prophet didn't say we should love the good or hate the evil. We should love the good and hate the evil. I think if we just love the good without hating the evil, we just become sentimental. But if we hate the evil without loving the good, we just become damn good haters. And I am tempted to hate the United Methodist Church right now and become a damn good hater. However, we are both to love the good and hate the evil. We might not be aware of this fully, but 2/3 of the delegates from the United States voted for the plan that included LGBTQ persons. We are not alone in this. 2/3 of the American delegates. When I think of apportionments, I have to be aware that King Avenue has received apportionment money. In some years, we received more apportionment money than any other church in the conference. We received it to pay Anna's salary as a resident minister. We received it to start Stone Village Church. We have received it for campus ministry. That's loving the good. Yesterday, Bishop Palmer said he will not engage in a witch hunt to go after LGBTQ ordained ministers. And he will not engage in a witch hunt to go after ministers who have performed same-gender marriages. That's good. It's particularly good for me and Colleen because we've been doing them for 3 years. Okay? And it's good that the traditional plan that is so hateful has been essentially gutted as unconstitutional by our judicial council. There is almost nothing of it left to do bad. I imagine some of us want to love the good without hating the evil, and some of us right now want to hate the evil without loving the good. And I would encourage us to do both. To do both. Frankly, I am embarrassed to call myself a United Methodist. But I'm very proud to say I'm the pastor, one of the pastors at King Avenue Church. And I imagine you're feeling about the same thing. You might be embarrassed to be United Methodist, but you are proud to be at King Avenue. What will happen to King Avenue? Frankly, I think with the gutting of the traditional plan, I think very little will happen to us. People periodically contact Colleen and me and say, "Is King Avenue a safe place to come?" We've always said yes. And we continue to say, yes, it is a safe place to come. I think one effect on us is that more people will be coming to us looking for a safe place, and we're going to have to be more welcoming of the stranger, and that's good news. The Gay Men's Chorus contacted me this week and wanted to know if they could still continue to have the Joy concerts here because of what happened in St. Louis. Well, of course they're going to have it here. We've already got our contract and we're ready to sign it. And of course, Cap Pride will be here. And of course, the Transgender Day of Remembrance will be here. This isn't going to have an effect on us tangibly. But I do want to say the tangible effect is the hurt is there. And we can't deny the hurt that has been done. Okay, now, I'm ready for a sermon. You might not be, but I am ready for a sermon. Because it's helpful for me to put these painful things and these hateful things and these loving things in a theological and biblical context. Because when I do that, I understand that God is working in my life and in our life, and we are working in God's life. And there's no separation between us and God, but we're together in this. So it's very important for me to reflect on these things theologically and biblically. And Transfiguration Sunday is a great thing, Sunday to reflect on what's happened. The text that Jeff read begins with 8 days after saying these things. Jesus took the disciples up a high mountain. 8 days, what did he say 8 days before? 8 days before, he predicted his death at the hands of the religious leaders and authorities. And then he predicted his resurrection in the hands of God. Death at the hands of the religious authorities and resurrection in the hands of God. And then Jesus goes on to say, whoever will save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will save it. So Jesus is preaching here death and resurrection. And death and resurrection are fundamental to the Christian message. I mean, it's in communion. Christ has died, Christ is risen, Christ will come again. And it's great that we're having communion today. Jesus believes this pattern of death and resurrection will be true for him and will be true for us. Resurrection follows death. And death precedes resurrection. Something must first die to be resurrected. Unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains a seed. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Something must die in order to be resurrected. It isn't just physical death that Jesus is talking about. He's talking about our daily life. In order to be resurrected as a sober person, one must die to one's addictions. In order to have my relationships resurrected, I must die to my self-centeredness and my self-righteousness. I think of my mother's dying. Her death was a long death. She had Alzheimer's. She went downhill for years. And toward the end of Mom's life, where she was bedridden, the doctors would come in to my sister and me and say, if we just do this surgery, we could prolong your mother's life. If we do this procedure, your mother will live 3 more months. And Ann and I thought, Mom wouldn't want this. She would be embarrassed to be seen this way. And I thought, no. And Ann agreed, no more. Let her die in peace and in dignity. We're just putting off her future life. We're not letting her be resurrected. We're just prolonging Mom's dying. Stop it. Unless there's a death, there's no resurrection. By resisting death, we resist new life. We prevent resurrection by just hanging on, and of course we hang on, because that's all we know. When I graduated, just before I graduated from seminary, about the last class and the last thing that was said before they ushered us out the door was this saying about those who lose their life will gain it, but those who save their life will lose it, is true for the church too. Churches that try to hold on and prevent their dying will die without a resurrection. But churches that die will be resurrected because they're preparing the way for new life. And man, I knew that when I was at DS. Churches that held on and held on and held on were never resurrected. But those who chose to die to the way it always has been were resurrected. So here's what I wonder about the United Methodist denomination. Is the denominational struggle which we've been engaged in for decades preventing the resurrection of a new church and a new denomination because we are refusing to die by hanging on to the way it is? Does God have something new in mind for both sides in this debate? But we're not letting it happen because we hold on for dear life to the only thing we know. I don't think I'll ever get this image out of my mind of standing in section 115 at the Dome in St. Louis, looking down at the floor where all the delegates were, and I thought, I am watching the death of the United Methodist Church. And it gave me hope. For where there's death, there's hope. And we are a people of the resurrection. We're a people of the resurrection. And we believe that death is followed by resurrection, and sometimes we make the mistake of preventing resurrection. Unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it cannot bear fruit. Now that's hard to say, and the disciples had trouble taking it, to talk about death leading to resurrection, because we don't want to die. We want to hold on to the way it is. So now we get Act 2 of this transfiguration story. So now Jesus is taking them up the mountain, and Jesus is transfigured in the presence of John and James and Peter. It's as if God says, you have doubts about the resurrection? You don't think there's a resurrection? Well, let me show you. Let's go up the mountain and I'll show you what the resurrection looks like. And they see Jesus in glory. They see his face shining. They see him full of the Spirit. They see the new creation. They see the new life that God has in mind, not only for Jesus, but for all of us. You got doubts? Here's what it's going to look like in the future if you die to the way you are. It'll be bright. It'll be spirited. It'll be full of life. God will be present, and we will be present to God. Now that you've seen the resurrection, are you willing to live into it? Now that you've seen what a sober life looks like, are you willing to give up your addictions? Now that you've seen what a healthy relationship looks like, are you willing to give up your self-righteousness? We need that vision of the future. Many of us at General Conference kind of got a glimpse of the vision of the future, of the church that God has in mind. For those of you who watched the live streaming, the vision of the future was Jeffrey Warren, a clergy person from New York, who got up to talk, and his face just shone. He was so excited about the future of the United Methodist Church. He saw a new church if we could just let this one die. Go on YouTube and pull up Jeffrey Warren. He goes by JJ. I saw the resurrected church, and it looks good. One of you texted me as he was speaking and wrote, "Go gay boy." And I think, yep, go gay boy. I doubt if the United Methodist Church has a future. But I know there will be some form of Wesleyan theology and some form of Methodism that has a bright future. It'll have a different body because the resurrected body is different. But we will have a new life. And it's exciting and it's bright. Now, Act 3. Peter wants to stay up there in that brightness, in that resurrection area full of life. But Jesus says, we've got to come down from the valley. We've got to go down to the valley. We've got to live in the world. We've got to be in ministry. And Jesus encounters this father who's so frustrated with the disciples because they can't heal his son, who it sounds like the son has epilepsy, and he's foaming and he can't be controlled. And Jesus is frustrated with the disciples. And Jesus heals the boy. And all praise God for the greatness of God. The time between the transfiguration and the resurrection is half of Luke's gospel. Between this bright vision of the future and the actual future, we've got half a gospel to get through. So what do? Well, they confront and comfort, they heal, and they feed, and they teach, and they learn, and they bungle, and they irritate each other, and they practice dying, and they practice resurrection. They engage in ministry to the world is what they do. So what do we do between the bright vision of our transfiguration and the future? We do what we always have done. We tutor. We make bologna and cheese sandwiches. We sing. We ring. We teach. We learn. We put on drama. We march in the pride parade. We pray. We come out. We eat. We support. We cook, we welcome, we laugh with those who laugh and weep with those who weep. We do marriages, we irritate each other, we bungle, we fail, we succeed, we forgive, we show mercy to each other. We die to what we need to die to. We have rummage sales. We have children's teas. I tell you, yesterday, the children invited the old people in the congregation to have a tea with them, and it was delightful. I hope you all get old so you can go to the children's teas. We will practice resurrection, and we're not going to be passive. We can't wait anymore for a resurrection. We've got to work toward it. And I believe we will be joining with other churches to look for the new expression of Methodism and inclusive Methodism. So what is King Avenue going to do? I've got 3 things I want to say, and then we'll be done. 1, I think it was 2004 when I was a DS, I came here for a weekend and participated in the life of King Avenue for a weekend. Now, as a DS, I had been working with a lot of dying churches, trying to revive them. And I came here for that weekend, and I thought, OMG, this is a vision of what the church should be. This is a vision of the resurrected church. And I want to take this church back to Dayton and show it to every church. Or I want everybody in Dayton to come up and spend a weekend at King Avenue, because this is the future that we're working toward. So we are, in a sense, a transfigured church that people are looking to. I never experienced such grace and such spirit as I did that weekend when I came here. 2, these are just 2 experiences that I've had recently that involve King Avenue. One is, I was interviewed on Wednesday by Channel 6 for their evening news. I did a really good job in that interview. And I said really good things. And we were they interviewed me in the sanctuary upstairs. Some of you have never been up there, but it's nice up there. And they interviewed me, and as I was being interviewed, the cameraman kept going. And in between, while other things were being set up, I talked to the cameraman, and he just said, "Oh, this church has really got it figured out. It's really a good church, and it gives me such hope that there are churches like King Avenue." And then I saw the on Channel 6 News the interview, and all my good stuff was cut out. And I thought, why did they leave this on the floor? And I thought, maybe as he was nodding, he was jerking the camera, and it just didn't show up. But I thought, King Avenue is really important to people like the cameraman at Channel 6. Here's another story. 2 weeks ago, Colleen and I were invited to be on the board of Mosaic. Mosaic is a project that is funded by the Center for Disease Control that is to work with non-conforming, non-binary LGBT youth between the ages, youth of color between the ages of 13 and 29. And so we went to their dinner, and their covered dish dinner, to learn about the group. And I was really impressed with the group. And I looked around at it, and I thought, Colleen and I don't really fit in here. Non-binary, non-conforming, LGBTQ, persons of color, 13 to 29. And, so afterwards I went up to Corey, the person who organized the meeting, and I said, I thought it was a great meeting, but I don't quite get why you invited us. After all, Colleen is over 29,
John's not smart enough.
Oh. And he said, well, you're the ministers at King Avenue. That seemed to suffice for him. He said, King Avenue supports these things. We want you to help us in this ministry. there is such a place for our church. There is such a need for our church. We have a bright future that we're going to work through and for together. We're going to practice resurrection, and we're going to offer resurrection to all. So I just want you to remember, go, gay boys, go, gay girls, go, allies. May it be so.